listening to the episodes. I know it's monthly still, and we're working on that. But thanks for coming back for another episode. You guys are awesome. I really appreciate you giving me all that love on the Instagram and Facebook and TikTok. I do have a subscription on TikTok now. But I love getting to know y'all, especially fellow Tennesseans. And those of you who just love Tennessee, I know most of y'all come up for Gatlinburg and Pigeon Forge, but I love it. I love that you guys want to know about our history. If you guys do have suggestions for the episodes, you can reach me at that tnfeeling@gmail.com. I love the suggestions, comments, or if you want to say hi. If you have a second there, I really also would appreciate if you'd rate the podcast on Spotify or Apple. 5 stars are always appreciated. It just kind of helps get the podcast out to more people. I also want to say a big thank you to Unfiltered Studios for allowing me to be a part of your group. If you have not checked out Unfiltered Studios, do so. I mean, there's some amazing podcasts on there. Stupid History Minutes on there. 12th Street Talkback is on there. Pedals of Support. Nailed It with St. Joe. I mean, if you're looking for a new podcast, y'all got to just check it out. It's awesome. Travel, sports, daily motivations, movie reviews, so much more. Y'all, if you're looking for something, definitely check out Unfiltered Studios. You're going to hear some amazing people talk about some really interesting stuff. Hope you guys enjoyed last month's episode. Now, I want to go ahead and tell y'all that while I'm doing this podcast and I am talking about Tennessee, we are going to talk about a few topics that we're not going to be able to avoid. All right, so y'all, Tennessee is obviously a southern state, and that means that, yeah, they were in the Civil War, and yeah, they participated in slavery. All right, so it would be missing a huge part of its history if we did not address any of that. So we are going to talk about it. We're going to talk about parts of the Civil War, people who chose to be Confederates, people who supported the South, people who didn't support the South, people who still somehow support the South, people who believed in slavery and things like that, because it is part of Tennessee history. Do not tell me it's racist. Do not tell me it's fairy tales. Do not be rude. Do not be anything like that. I will block you. But I am talking about history. Okay, guys? So I just need to give you all that warning. And remember that you all chose to listen to this podcast. So, that's your warning. I ain't gonna put up with rude people. If you ain't got nothing nice to say, don't say anything at all. We Southerners appreciate that more, you know. But, I just want to let y'all know because of this week's episode, or this month. One day we'll do weekly episodes. Or 2 weeks. I don't know. But this month's episode kind of has those tones. So, or it's history. So, this month's episode, we're going to talk about the boy hero of the Confederacy, better known as Sam Davis to us Tennesseans. And I know who Sam Davis is because as a kid, we went to the Sam Davis house in Smyrna. I was in 3rd or 4th grade. I don't remember. I just remember going, and then I went again as an adult. And of course, as a kid, you were given the short version of who Sam Davis was. He was just a Confederate. And you walked through this house, and it was a really nice plantation home and a lot of land. And to a kid, it was just, it was a nice place. But who really was Sam Davis? Because people still talk about him to this day. He's well remembered and somewhat, I guess, well regarded in Tennessee. So let's talk about who he really was and what his history is. Well, Sam was born on October 6th, 1842 in Rutherford County, Tennessee. He was the oldest son of Charles Lewis Davis and Jane Davis, and the Davis family owned that plantation that I got to visit and had 51 enslaved people by 1860, so they were actually doing really well for themselves. And Sam was actually gifted an enslaved person, Coleman Davis, when he was a child. The farm he lived on was over 800 acres. They produced cotton and corn, and they even had a butchery for hogs. So they really were kind of in the elite class for Tennesseans because there was only about 140 planters that even owned over 50 enslaved people for Tennessee at that time. Now, Sam attended school in Smyrna and went to Western Military Institute, which actually exists to this day, and some of you have heard of it. It's called Montgomery Bell Academy now. Sam went to that school from 1860 to 1861. Well, if you know your history, you know that's also when the Civil War was going on. And he was actually taught by headmaster and future Confederate General Bushrod Johnson. Lord, some of these names, y'all. Okay. Now, Sam was eventually recruited by the Confederate Scout Forces early in the Civil War, and he signed up as a private in the 1st Tennessee Infantry Regiment in 1861. And of course, as soon as he was recruited, his regiment went to fight, and they fought at Cheat Mountain in Virginia, and then in Shenandoah Valley, and then at Shiloh, and then in Perryville. The fact that he even survived all these battles is amazing, especially Shiloh. He was minorly wounded in Shiloh, which is amazing because most people didn't survive Shiloh. Shiloh was an extremely, extremely bloody battle in the Civil War. But somehow he survived only minorly wounded, but he did suffer more severe wounds at Perryville. He recovered, which is more amazing because most people didn't recover from their wounds, and eventually took a very active service as a courier for Coleman's Scouts. Now, who were Coleman's Scouts? Well, the Scouts were basically the eyes and ears in the Army of Tennessee. They weren't really spies because they would just cross enemy lines to get information about the Union, but they did so in uniform, blatantly in uniform. And they didn't care. They did so relying on their stealth and speed of their horses. They were just going to outrun people. And they mostly operated in Middle Tennessee, so think of the Nashville area. And they really each had their own routes for their most part, so they kind of worked solo. Now, Sam was pretty good, and he outran a lot of people, and, it's one of those things, you do it enough, eventually you're going to get caught. Well, unfortunately, Sam did eventually get caught. He was working in the Scouts when he was captured near Minor Hill, Tennessee, which is Giles County, on November 20th, 1863. He had been on a mission behind Union lines on a special duty around Nashville when he got caught. He was caught in possession of miscellaneous newspapers and documents that had detailed drawings of Union fortifications around Nashville and other towns in Middle Tennessee. He was immediately imprisoned in Pulaski, which was a garrison Union town commanded by General Grenville M. Dodge. And of course, Davis faced horrible charges. He faced charges of espionage. And Davis, he refused to give up the names of his informants. He was not going to give them up. He was snitches get stitches, and he was not going to go there, y'all. So, he sat there. Now, he could have given up the names of Dr. Coleman, who was a general in the Confederate Army, but he refused to do so. He knew that if he gave him up, he'd save himself, but he wasn't going to do that. He was eventually found guilty, and General Dodge announced that Davis would be hung on a hill that was described as a pretty immense hill. Like, everybody knew this hill, and it was just north of Pulaski, and it overlooked the town. Locals protested at this because they thought it was too gruesome to be put on display, and he was really young. Really young. Dodge told the citizens, "I want him hung where you can see him. I don't want people doing this again." So basically, this poor kid was going to be, he was going to be that warning. Don't do this. Don't do it again. So, had he given up everybody, he would have saved himself. But he knew that wasn't what he wanted to do. He wanted to, I don't know if I wouldn't call it a hero. I don't know if I'd call it a martyr, but he just wasn't going to do it. According to newspaper accounts, which was told by several eyewitnesses, Dodge again offered Davis his life if he would just give up his informants. And Davis reportedly asked Dodge, "Would you betray a friend?" Well, he wasn't, and he didn't. Davis was finally hung by Union forces in Pulaski, Tennessee on November 7th, 1863. So he was only imprisoned 7 days. He had a very quick trial, and he was only there for 7 days before he was hung. He was taken up on the execution site in the back of a wagon, sitting on his own coffin. And as he rode up the hill, even the Union soldiers just said, "Give up the information." They didn't want to see this gruesome sight. Nobody wanted to see it. He was too young and it was too gruesome. Even the officer in charge of his hanging said it was said to be very uncomfortable because Davis was young and he just really didn't want to carry out these orders. Davis told the officer, "Sir, I did my duty. Now, sir, please do yours." I don't know, for a 20-year-old, that's a lot to say. A lot of Union soldiers present at the execution actually wrote about Davis's death in their journals and talked about it because it made a lot of them uncomfortable. A lot of them didn't feel right about this. He was too young. And a large group was there to witness the scene, and all the citizens were uncomfortable with it as well. The chaplain gave Davis a last prayer, and at 10:30, the hood was put over Davis's head before the trapdoor was pulled. He actually died fairly quickly for a hanging. He only died in 3 minutes. Union soldiers wrote that Davis stood like a hero, never paling at the moment. One even wrote he stood like a man, even though he wasn't. Davis's fate was actually not that unusual, though, for that time. And it wasn't even that he was the only one that shared this fate. A lot of intelligence gatherers around Nashville during the Civil War were actually hung for this same problem. Like when they were caught and tried, they were hung. Because a lot of rural counties around Nashville were actually under Union control, and it was basically a no man's land during this time of this conflict. So basically, if Union controlled it, they could do whatever they wanted. They had a quick trial, and then you were just hung. The provost marshal actually records that there were a lot of executions during this time due to espionage, and in fact, a lot of victims didn't even get trials; they were just hung. Davis at least got a trial. In fact, 6 months before Davis's trial, the Union publicly executed Joseph Smith in Carthage in Smith County. A lot of these people weren't even known or remembered and only covered in those provost marshal records. Their names were barely written down. The only reason that Sam Davis is actually remembered is, first of all, because he's young. Secondly, because a lot of people wrote him down. And thirdly, is because his family wouldn't let anybody forget. Sam's father erected a 25-foot monument to his son at the back of the family's plantation outside of Smyrna. You can actually still see it today. The story also continued to be remembered thanks to Sumner Archibald Cunningham, the founding editor of the Confederate Veteran magazine. Now, a native of Middle Tennessee, Cunningham pretty much had an undistinguishable record in the Confederate service. He actually served, but he deserted the Army of Tennessee at the Battle of Nashville in 1864. So this isn't exactly somebody who had a proud record. After the war, he came back and worked for a newspaper before becoming a general agent for the Jefferson Davis Memorial Fund after Davis had died in 1889. Now, he eventually founded the Veteran in January of 1893, and he learned about Davis through the Veteran when a subscriber had actually submitted a school oration about Davis. Some kid was talking about Davis in a school project. He heard about Davis again when he went to the Shiloh reunion in April of 1895. Now, Davis had fought at Shiloh and people talking about him. But this time he had actually heard about him, not only from him fighting there, but 2 eyewitnesses had also recounted the execution, who had said that the Federal Army was in grief from having to execute this child. That's right, they even called him a child. Now, Cunningham decided that he was going to set out and remember Sam Davis at that point. So he collected as many eyewitness accounts as he could from whoever was there at the execution. He got them from those who lived in Pulaski, from the soldiers that were left, and he gathered as much information as he could about Sam Davis. He was determined to keep this man's memory alive. He wanted Davis to have a memorial erected at the Capitol grounds in Nashville, and for Davis to remember as a hero and as a martyr. He wanted people to know that Davis had been executed as a miscarriage of justice. Remember, not everybody shares your same perspective. Since the late 1890s, Davis has been elevated above other Tennesseans as that Confederate war hero, thanks to Cunningham. Today, representations of life and death of Sam Davis are marked in Tennessee and his narrative. No matter how much it's been helped along, it still stands in Tennessee. And in fact, it really does. You can still see it to this day. The Davis story really didn't spread, though, beyond Tennessee. No matter how hard it's tried, it's still just a Tennessee boy's story. Still just a guy out of Smyrna who was a Confederate, who got caught and got hanged. Sorry, it's what it is. But you can find markers commemorating him at the scene of his execution on the court square in Pulaski. You can find it at his childhood home in Smyrna. And you can actually find it, a life-size statue at the southeast corner of the state capitol grounds in Nashville. I've actually seen it. I've seen the thing in Pulaski, and I've been to his childhood home in Smyrna. His name is still alive in the state of Tennessee, y'all. You can find a permanent display about him in the Tennessee State Museum that includes the overcoat he wore at the time of his arrest and the boots in his paper that were concealed, which is what damned him for his crimes. Now, you can still visit the Sam Davis home outside of Smyrna, Tennessee, where he grew up. You can see the house that was originally built on the lands, which was a log cabin in 1810, and it was remodeled by Charles Davis, Sam's father, in 1847. That's that plantation house I talked about. The state of Tennessee actually officially acquired the house in 1827 and turned it into a museum for its association with Sam Davis. The house is on the National Register of Historic Places as of December 23rd, 1969, and the grounds include 2 historic homes and several outbuildings that would have helped run the plantation. The slave quarters are still standing, and in fact, you can still see the family cemetery. The house, home/museum, does show hundreds of personal effects from the family that lets you see what it would have been like to live through the Civil War. You can visit the house Monday through Saturday, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., and it's about $20 a person. And they do have yearly Victorian Halloween events and seasonal ghost tours, so you can enjoy that right about now. But is the house haunted? I don't know. I was a kid. I didn't pay attention. But a lot of people seem to think so. But I mean, I could see it. I really could. There was a lot of fighting in that area, not to mention the slaves, not to mention the grief. I mean, they've heard reports of footsteps, some weird feelings, cold spots. They keep hearing someone crying. You can see a child running through the halls if you see it just right. They see a woman in a green dress from the 1800s lingering around. They see a tall man with a slender beard peeking out the windows. And I mean, albeit, the house really does have a tragic history. Again, the war wasn't fought far from its doorstep, and death was definitely on the property. It's probably not hard to imagine something wanting to hang around. So I guess you're going to have to visit and find out on your own, guys. Well, y'all, if you want somewhere spooky to visit for Halloween, I guess you can head on over to the Sam Davis Cemetery or house, or just drive by, see if you see something peeking out the windows at y'all. I hope y'all have a good rest of your month. It is fall now. Happy fall, y'all. Thanks for listening and supporting the podcast. I'll see y'all next month. I do have something kind of exciting, kind of spooky planned for October. Be nice to one another, y'all, and don't forget to stay country.
This podcast is a production of Unfiltered Studios. If you would like to know more about joining Unfiltered Studios, please visit our website at unfpod.com for more information.